I'm going to change my bands here. Don't cut to my satellite because I'm going to be changing bands like there's no tomorrow here. Trying to figure out what exactly is causing that.
We'll stick with Nelson's radar for the time being then, which appears to be painting a clearer picture each hour by where the centre of this storm likely is.
Yeah, I would say you can see the storm tracking line there. I would say the center is a little bit north and possibly even further to the west of that, due south of Marsh Island, if not to the south-southwest. And this is not going to come up through the Atchafalaya Vermilion Bay area, I do not believe. And the longer it stalls, the further west it's going to go. That puts areas like Crowley and Jennings under the gun. Certainly Lake Charles, based on the last percentages you gave us before we left for the hour.
Yeah, and that was the latest National Hurricane Center wind probability percentages that they had. 49% in Port Arthur. Up from 25% 6 hours ago. So a part of Texas is now almost more likely than not to get tropical storm force winds, and I don't think we thought we'd be saying that.
No, and it's because the storm's tracking further west than expected, and if we're being honest here, at least I feel strongly it's going to continue to do. I think it's going to. I'm thinking it could be up to 5-6 hours before it makes the turn.
Well, that then supports what Nathan said, probably mid-morning and lunchtime.
Yes.
So it could go into the afternoon.
It really could. Let's see.
I think it will at this point.
See what's happening with that latest imagery again. It seems to be getting a sharp edge towards the northern tip there.
Yeah, a much sharper edge, and I'm starting to see as well. I'm actually going to pause the imagery for this. That crack that you were referring to, I guess, if you will.
Yes.
And it's this kind of thing where I'm thinking we have the center, and it's creating its own kind of dry line, like this place where convection is triggered. You can see there's a fine line between the strong convection and the not so strong, and I think it's just this dry line, if you will, this gradient in the amount of moisture available to it, and it's kind of using that as a trigger for convection, almost kind of like at a larger scale you'd see thunderstorm develop for severe weather. It's very strange, but I think that's what it's doing. It's built its own internal convective trigger, if you will. But it's also at the same time kind of going to screw the western side over a little bit. And I think this could be the beginning of that eastward bias in the convection that we could really start to see in the near future.
Who was going to speak next there? Well, I guess we've got an open floor.
Well, Nathan, I've switched back to the New Orleans radar, and I would like to point out that if you look at this time lapse, this is over an hour's worth of radar imagery, and places like Pascagoula, Mobile, Bayou La Batre, Alabama, Bay Minette, they are not getting out of the precipitation at this time, with very strong cells still offshore and about to head onshore. So we're talking a system from parts of Texas all the way across Louisiana, about 274 miles, all the way across Mississippi, 75 miles, plus 30 some odd miles into Alabama. This is a very large system for as disorganized as it looked just 12 hours ago.
And it's a massive improvement on just 3 hours ago. when we were looking at, I mean, for the first time, we were talking about how the convection had started to actually be pretty much over the center, not too far away, and then this new burst just began, and it's continued to expand, and is still blowing up. It reminds me a little bit of an erupting volcano right now when you look at that convection, and just how widespread that burst has now extended itself. You could say it's probably, that singular convective burst is probably about half the size of Louisiana right now.
I would agree with that.
And 3 hours ago, it didn't exist.
No, it did not. It was actually 3 separate little blossoms of convection 3 hours ago. There is still that bit of convection south of, it's not Lake Charles. I don't know which lake that is. Probably about 30 miles to the east of Lake Charles, there's a body of water, and there is a small blowup of convection there to the southwest of the circulation center.
Oh.
But south of the Vermilion Bay area, that convection center, it was 3 separate areas. It's now one large area. We are still seeing the precipitation on the eastern side of the storm as we expected. It's still worse there. It's quite dry in West Louisiana and most of Texas. But I don't know how that will change given the changing dynamics of this storm.
If you missed it, the National Hurricane Center updated not so long ago. Their 4 a.m. advisory has no change in anything, not its wind speed or its pressure or the warnings that are in effect. One thing that did change was the forward motion, which is up from 3 miles per hour to 5. A reminder of what the current situation is. So it's 29.1 north, 91.8 west now. That puts it 55 miles southwest of Morgan City, Louisiana. So I think they've got it a bit closer than we have, and 165 miles from the mouth of the Mississippi River. A hurricane warning remains in effect for Intracoastal City to Grand Isle, a tropical storm warning for the mouth of the Pearl River to Grand Isle, Lake Pontchartrain and Lake Maurepas, including metropolitan New Orleans and Intracoastal City to Cameron. A storm surge warning in effect for Intracoastal City to Biloxi and Lake Pontchartrain, a storm surge watch for Biloxi to the Mississippi-Alabama border, a hurricane watch for the mouth of the Mississippi River to Grand Isle and Intracoastal City to Cameron, a tropical storm watch east of the mouth of the Pearl River to the Mississippi-Alabama border. Let's go and show you the latest tracking map from the National Hurricane Center as well. We haven't shown this just yet, but here it is now for the first time, the 4 a.m. advisory, and you can see what's expected of it. They are still expecting a hurricane landfall, even though it's not depicted in this graphic, and then weakening to tropical storm status shortly afterwards, and then weakening to tropical depression status in northern Louisiana on Sunday. It should survive into Arkansas as a tropical cyclone on Sunday night, and then continue to push off towards the north. The remnants of the storm could strike Thomas.
Yeah, it definitely could. And the farther west it goes, the more likely that is to occur. And with the new upper level chart, the new 8Z upper level chart, we're really starting to see a trend from 6 to 8Z, and the trend is, and you can see it on really all the levels. I think 750 is going to be the best place to see. We see it 6Z, the general, the low pressure extends to about this point. Ridge is barely disconnected at this point, the small point of weakness, and that point of weakness does converge, and they're in the point of weakness to show strengthening in the ridge. But what you'll notice is a much better rounded system at this point, and a much more expansive influence that the system has now, indicative of extensive amounts of strengthening, at least at the higher levels. And with that being said, we also now see the significant break in where these two ridges were interacting with each other, which could finally be the break that's needed in order for Barry to start making that turn northward. And as Barry strengthens, I think it's going to break into this ridge some more, and that turn northward will grow more likely.
All right, I think we're joined by Tim, our current Force 13 US head. Hello?
We are, and good morning to everybody here on the East Coast. Very early coverage for us.
Crazy night.
Yes, it has been.
So we're continuing to look at the radar imagery as well as that satellite for Barry right now. It's really blown up in the last few hours, Tim. I don't know if you've seen it yet. What's your take?
I'll be honest, Nathan, I have not. I just woke up after doing coverage on the U.S. channel about 5 hours ago, so I have not actually had the chance to really see what Barry has done during the overnight hours.
If you're able to see our stream right now, you can see what it's looking like at this moment.
Yeah, there we go. It does look like the western Blavo convection that Thomas and the rest of the team were discussing last night looks like it's eroded away, and the main central area is still held up pretty good. It's a lot closer to shore than what we were looking at last night. It's a little bit further
yet not
east.
Not far enough towards shore than what we were hoping to see today. By hoping, I mean to say, the quicker this thing makes landfall, the better, in all honesty. Because if it doesn't, two things are going to happen. More rainfall and more chance of reaching hurricane status, plus maybe more.
Yeah, that was something that we were discussing last night, as whether or not it was actually going to reach it. And I figured we would have had landfall by this hour, the way the National Hurricane Center was discussing it last night.
Yeah, that's what I was preparing for here. I was preparing to go live at. I've been here for just over 3 hours now. I was expecting landfall to be occurring pretty soon. But the way this is going, it's going to be at least 9 a.m. Central Daylight Time. It looks like it's going to miss that now as well, to be honest, because we're 5 hours away from that. And we're still looking at potentially... Well, actually, let me just do a little... just based on the last half hour, I would say that... just doing some number crunching right now. It's probably still 6 hours or 7 hours away from landfall.
And it has picked up some forward speed since previous advisory. It's gone from 3 to 5 miles an hour, and it's probably going to continue to pick up speed now that the ridge is really starting to crack up in the United States, both at the lower levels. The upper levels, it's not really cracking, but Barry is starting to have a higher influence in those upper levels, and because of that, I think that Barry is going to start to make its turn north relatively soon.
So
I'd say probably within the next 3 to 4 hours, it will make that turn. I'd say it'll probably be within the next hour or two, but at the latest, it'll be about 3-4 hours.
We have some questions. Could 93L form?
I mean, technically yes, but no.
I think that was a question that came up last night on
popular
the
question.
Yeah, it has been. Looking at the early model guidance, there was only 2 models that initiated it last night when I looked at it on the U.S. channel, and both models took it down into South America. So right now it's a very low confidence it's actually going to form.
Another question. Do you think Houston to Cameron may have to evacuate if it continues west?
Houston's definitely not going to be in the picture.
No.
Cameron, I believe, is under a lot of watches in the morning, so if you're in Cameron, yeah, you should be getting out of there.
The problem with that I'm sorry. The problem with that is it's 4:15 in the morning, and people who went to sleep at a reasonable hour, which we did not, thought this storm was going to be impacting New Iberia, Lafayette, tropical storm winds out to New Orleans, which may or may not happen anymore in terms of the tropical storm winds. Issuing an evacuation order at this time would be fairly ineffective. I do hope that those people are monitoring the situation, because you've got to remember that the cone is where they expect the center to be 2 out of 3 times. And most of the time, it's like flipping a coin. It's going to be 50-50 over 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 tries. But you will get on runs where it's heads, 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 heads over and over again. And hopefully the people in those areas of western Louisiana, eastern Texas haven't forgotten that and have enough information to have monitored the situation, and when they wake up will continue to monitor the situation, because as of right now, issuing an evacuation order for those areas is not going to be effective. They should, but I don't think it'll practically work.
They have to be prepared for a tropical storm in Cameron. 92% chance of tropical storm force winds, according to the National Hurricane Center. And even in parts of Texas, 49% chance of somewhere in Texas getting tropical storm force winds.
I completely agree on that, Nathan, but what was that percentage at the 10 o'clock p.m. Central Time warning?
25.
Well, therein lies the problem, is that the situation has changed dramatically since then. And so again, you have to, if you're anywhere near a tropical system like this, be prepared for any eventuality. And when you wake up, make sure you apprise yourself of the situation. Have a NOAA weather radio with same technology. It will go off in the middle of the night. It'll scare you to death, but at least you'll know what's going on. And that is one of the most important things you can have, is to get the real-time updates. You need to have that weather radio that's going to go off like an alarm when an alert comes out, because otherwise you could go to sleep at 10 p.m. thinking you're fairly in the clear, 25% chance. Now you're in the 90s.
25% to 49. The Cameron location is at 92. I think previously it was 67 or something like that. But, sharp rises across the board further west.
I have a question from a viewer on the Facebook page, and I'll ask Nelson, what about the storm surge factor on the barrier islands?
Well, the storm's getting larger, and on the east side of the storm, you're going to have water pushing from the south to the north. So you talk about Grand Isle, you talk about even going back to right now, the radar's not showing it, but because we're showing the Lake Charles radar. But if you go back to the New Orleans radar, the Chandelier Islands off the coast of Louisiana, Ship Island, Cat Island off the coast of Mississippi, 12 miles south of Gulfport and Biloxi, Mississippi. You talk about Dauphin Island. You even talk about Santa Rosa Island, which is where Pensacola Beach is, Gulf Breeze, Florida. Those areas are getting persistent storms and persistent winds from the south to the north. So they're experiencing the surge now, and with the size of this storm, who knows how long they will continue to experience that surge for. I believe Tim said last night when the U.S. was running the stream that high tides around 11 o'clock in the morning hours Central Daylight Time. So the tides are just rising and the winds keep pushing from the south to the north. I don't think there's any respite in terms of storm surge for the barrier islands. For places like New Orleans, even closer to Mandeville, Slidell, which are on the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain, yes, there's going to be water overtopping the seawalls in those areas based on the wind, based on the gusts. But nothing flowing up the Mississippi River as far as we can tell right now. But however, Vermilion Bay at Chafalaya Bay, where the storm was supposed to make landfall over Marsh Island into New Iberia, the further west it goes, the longer amount of time it has southerly winds pushing north into the shoreline. So storm surge is going to be a huge issue. This storm has slowed, it's not moving north. So as long as it stays over water, storm surge is a problem.
And you are right, Nelson. Just checking the tide chart that we were discussing last night. We are approaching low tide now for the Lake Pontchartrain area. That will be at complete low tide in about 25 minutes. And then we will start heading towards high tide, with high tide peaking at 5:09 Central Daylight Time. So whenever Barry does decide it wants to start moving in towards an eventual landfall, we will be dealing with high tide on top of the storm surge, which I believe last time when we looked at it on the U.S. channel, some of the bays there where we're anticipating landfall could get 3 to 6 feet storm surge on top of the normal tidal action for today.
Okay, I just want to cut in with two developing news items. Associated Press is now reporting nearly 50,000 people without power as the tropical storm Barry. Uh, this relates to Louisiana. And another news feed is saying dozens of power flashes lining up Morgan City, and most of the town is now without power.
That's not good.
At least one of the, if you want to call it a silver lining, is right now we're looking at a daytime landfall, which
That's
that
true.
might be the little bit of a silver lining with that is, yeah, your power is going to be lost. We usually see that with these type of tropical systems. With it being in the daytime, you can at least see what's going on. It's when you get these overnight and evening landfalls when the power goes out, that's when it gets really scary, especially if you're in these areas.
All right, we've got a development here on the satellite imagery as well. It would appear now that there is a little depression occurring in that convection that now corresponds with the center of Barry, as depicted by radar. So this could possibly be the eye starting to appear on satellite. Yet to confirm that, but it is the best match that we've seen so far. It might just fizzle away again, but there could be the possibility that the eye could be starting to appear here, but we'll keep you up to date on that.
That's an incredible development, because hours ago I was adamant there was no way that an eye might form in this system, but it just
Well,
goes
I'm
to
not
show you
saying
that.
it with any authority. I'm really not sure whether it will be the eye or not. It might be the case that it's not.
I
Oh
know
no,
when
absolutely, but it's just the nature of doing what we do is that we give our best information at the time, but that information can change so drastically, as we've seen over the past 3.5 hours on this stream, that all of a sudden there may be a chance of an eye. Not saying it's going to happen. You're not saying it's going to happen. But if you had have asked me 6 hours ago, no way, in my educated opinion, based on the presentation.
Thomas, what do you think? You've got the imagery too.
I think it's extremely interesting, and judging by some microwave imagery I was looking at as well, I think there's a very good chance that this is the formation of an eye wall beginning. And here's the biggest part of this that's really starting to give me at least an inkling feeling about it. Again, we have this kind of induced convection trigger that I was talking about, but with that, what we're starting to see is we had that depression there before, and what's going on is that depression really hasn't gone away. We see it here. If we go forward in time, we see the depression still better defined, and then we also see this big, very large convection this very strong convection there on the eastern side. And you can see what looks like is about to be a flare on the western side. And what's probably going to happen is this is going to blow up over. And once that blows up, what's going to probably happen is we're going to see another big flare. And after that big flare occurs, I think the eye is going to start really, the eye will is going to really start to get its act together. And I think this could be the beginning of some faster, if not, dare I say it, rapid intensification.
Whoa there. Well, that is certainly an interesting development.
I'd like to go back to a point that Tim made about storm surge and things like that. I had mentioned the north winds pushing up from even Lake Pontchartrain into area Covington, Mandeville, Slidell. I'm looking at some news footage. I was born in New Orleans, raised in Mandeville, live in downtown New Orleans now. I'm looking at live footage of Mandeville, and of course there is 18 inches to 2 feet of water above the New Orleans seawall in Mandeville, in places that I'm very familiar with. So yes, this persistent wind from the south is going to cause massive storm surge, devastating storm surge for anywhere that is east of the eye of the storm, as long as the storm persists, too.
Right. We're taking a short break here. We'll be back in just a few minutes with more coverage on this storm. Stay tuned. Force 13 Live, it's 4:30 Central Daylight Time as we continue to watch Tropical Storm Barry, which might not be a tropical storm for much longer. It could be about to reach hurricane status. My name is Nathan Foy and the team are here right now. Nelson, are you finishing up with us now, or...?
I'm going to have to at this time. I had my flubs a couple hours ago. That was fun. I got a little food in me, but I am very tired, and I
commend
don't
your
think I
effort.
can contribute. Well, thank you very much. And to Thomas, Tim, Nathan, good luck going further with this storm that we just don't know what's happening with it other than it's intensifying as I think it is.
Indeed. All right, Nelson, thank you very much for your help with our coverage tonight, live from New Orleans. And we'll see you again soon.
Thank you and good night.
All right. Well, the rest of us are staying here. If you've got any comments or questions for us whilst we're on the air, please send us a message. Start your message with Force13, all in text. We're here with you for as long as it takes by the looks of things, which could be quite a long time as we enter the morning hours in the US. We are also joined by Thomas, David, and Tim. Let's speak to Thomas first.
Alright, so you can see the satellite imagery on my screen at the moment, and I know that we've been discussing this quite a bit, but we have quite a bit of a convective flare-up that is occurring near the storm, and what I was talking about was that I thought this was the development of an eye, and with each passing frame, I said maybe rapid intensification, which might be a little outlandish to say, but I don't think it's out of the question. I mean, look at that, and tell me that that's not the beginnings of an eye wall.
Well,
I don't feel I don't feel like at this point. I mean, the fact that we've had the depression there for
it's
quite a
getting more
while at this
likely.
point. We had back at the beginning of the hour, and then we just started to see the flare-ups, and they're just getting more and more organized. The fact it's doing this, at least in my opinion, thinks it's pretty likely now that at this point that this is a developing eye.
Quite possibly, and that is very bad news if that is indeed the case. I still am reluctant to call it as such at this time. I'm just not sure whether what we're looking at is floppy convection that's that just might fade away, because I'm just looking at the latest satellite imagery on my band as well. And it's just starting to wane a little bit on the eastern side, and it might just die off straight away, and we might not be looking at this in an hour's time. I don't know. David, let's speak to you if you're there.
Speaking of floppies,
any input?
yeah.
I think you scared him away. All right, then let's talk to Tim.
Maybe.
Yeah, Nathan, looking at what Thomas is showing off of his imagery, we have been seeing that development of what could be a possible eye wall going back at least a good 6-7 hours now. I know when we were looking at it on the US channel last night, I was seeing off of the band 13 and band 14 infrareds where we were seeing what looked like some kind of structural center developing around Barry there, where it looked like it was trying to develop an eye wall then, and it looks like it's been kind of increasing and waning, and does look like in the last few frames there that we may be seeing a little bit of an eye wall like structure trying to develop. And I'm not saying like you are that that's an actual eye, but it has been trying to build one here over the last 6 hours, at least in my opinion.
Interesting times, and certainly very impressive looking convection. There's a question that came in. My town, Eunice, Louisiana, is in the center of the path of Barry. My question is, since I'm inland, what would the impacts of a direct impact be versus the center going slightly east or west? Depends how far inland. I mean, obviously the winds will decay the further inland you get, but the rainfall factor will definitely be there if you're anywhere near the center of this storm.
Yeah, let me take a look how far in the town of Eunice is. That way we have a little bit better idea. Okay, it is probably about 25 or 30 miles to the northwest of Lafayette. So Eunice is going to be getting the
Yes, I see it.
western side of this tropical storm once it does make landfall there.
All right. Somewhere there. So you
Just
can
got a
see it's just
satellite.
off the edge of the storm at the minute, and still looking pretty dry over there. And this is one of these, I would say, difficult to predict areas. One of the most uncertain areas that we can give you guidance for, because we just don't know how far the storm will track towards the west. If it shifts anywhere towards the east, then Eunice will probably get away with not much rain. It is quite far inland, so I think you'll probably see low to mid-range tropical storm force winds at worst, and if the storm does move further west, and if it makes landfall near Cameron, you could be looking at 16 inches of rain or more.
Indeed, Nathan. Eunice is right there in that sweet spot of any slight deviation on the track, whether it be a few miles to the west or east, as you said, could be the difference between just getting maybe an inch or two or getting the full brunt.
Indeed. Don't forget, the most of the rainfall and the worst of the storm is displaced to the east of the centre. You can quite clearly see all of that convection will be dumping huge amounts of rain over the waters right now. And the way this flare-up is going, you know, this looks like it's going to materialise into... Now, what are we seeing here? I'm just checking out this latest imagery, looking to the center of the storm. I'm trying to figure out what's going on.
What are your findings?
Well, you can see on those very last frames there, the convection is waning, but it is also opening out. And that is getting more convincing at each turn here, that we could be seeing an eye forming out of that. Let's see if we can get a ultra close-up on that right now and see what we're looking at. Let's go back to Thomas's
Nathan,
imagery for now.
what about that area to the southwest?
There is a little blob that's blown up, yes.
Yeah, on my imagery here, I personally, I'm still going to go with the fact I think this isn't a developing eye wall, which is really bad news. But I mean, if we take a look at this, convection is waning, but like you said, it's fanning out. And what we know about hurricanes is that whenever the convection really starts to blow up, it then proceeds to fan out. I mean, just the satellite imagery on our countdown that plays every time before we start here, you see the convection blow up and then fan out every single time the storm intensifies. It's not that uncommon to see, and I think that's what's going on right now. I'm still going with very high confidence that this is a developing eye wall. And I know and I know a lot of people find me to be an aggressive forecaster, but I'm rarely wrong, at least at this point. Although when I am wrong, I am very wrong. So it's the kind of thing of am I going to royally screw it up, or am I going to do well? We'll see. Right now, it looks like things are leaning in my favor.
Hold on a minute. People are
Yes.
starting to ask whether this will be more catastrophic than Katrina. Guys, I know. I mean, we've got some pretty short memories around here. Katrina
That is a very vehement no. Katrina was Category 3 when it went
Category
through
5 storm surge.
Yeah, Category 5 storm surge, Category 3 landfall when it went through 14 years ago. This is nowhere near on the scale of a Katrina, not by a long shot.
Further away from population centers too.
That too. If you want a good comparable storm to compare Barry to, I would say Gordon from last year would be probably a good Well, in terms of what its convection and current wind speed is, that's the closest that we have to it. And again, we had that debate of whether or not Gordon was making a potential eye wall at landfall, and we got the same scenario here going on with Barry this morning.
I'm just going to see. Okay, I am known to be quite a historian, so I'm going to delve into some archives and see if we can find some good comparisons whilst we keep looking at Thomas's imagery here.
And the convection continues to wane, but continues to fan out, and this is starting to really wrap itself around. I think this is going to wrap itself around, and as soon as that occurs, the cloud tops here are gradually going to, I guess, heat up in temperature. So I think that soon enough, we'll start to see this depression become much more noticeable and much more clearly defined.
And just following on to what Thomas has just said, National Hurricane Center has put out a posting. Tropical Storm Barry is expected to stream to hurricane status before reaching the Louisiana coastline late this morning or early afternoon.
The best analog tracking intensity-wise right now is Hurricane Danny of 1985. If anyone remembers that one.
Nope.
Struck this particular area as a high-end Category 1 and then swung up north and then east. Obviously, this storm is very different in its origins than most storms. Danny of 1985 started out in either the southern Gulf or in the westernmost Caribbean Sea. The usual way, and that was in August. So,
yeah, needless to say, Barry has been anything less than a conventional storm throughout its entire life cycle. I don't think there's been too many storms that have developed from a front that started over the U.S. and then ended up in the Eastern Gulf and then finally achieving cyclogenesis a couple of days after that.
I think Thomas's imagery is just a few minutes behind mine. What made me really think, what on earth is going on there, is starting to appear on your imagery now.
And that's the flare, I'd assume, right about
more that gap to the northwest there is what I'm thinking.
So you're thinking this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm thinking with it is we had the flare here, and it's just weakening, and since that's weakening, this is just gonna have to wrap around. But we'll see. I'm definitely intrigued.
Gee. Well, there we are.
I'll see.
So
looking at your image.
Here.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what this does, because it really is getting going right now. And so, what would you say the odds are that this is a developing eye wall nation?
60%.
Yeah, I'd go with about 70 to 80 at this point. But again, I'm aggressive with my forecast.
Well, I'm a fence sitter, so.
I'm a little bearish on my estimates. I would say 30%. I mean, it does look like we do have a few hot towers starting to blow up in the last few images. I'm looking back over probably about the last 30 minutes of imagery, and the imagery that I've got's about 10 minutes old. But I'm not, I mean, there could be a chance of an eye wall forming, but I'm just not really on board with it. I mean, I don't see really enough evidence to really support it. Not like we were seeing 6 hours ago.
So you're thinking that 6 hours ago it looked better, more conducive for an eye wall than it does now?
I would say yes. When we were looking at it on the US stream last night, you could really see the the structure was a lot more pronounced of it trying to build an eye wall. I'm not really seeing that off of the latest 1 minute imagery for the last 30 minutes.
That's really interesting because I have to admit I disagree. I feel like it wasn't anywhere near as, I guess, well defined. I mean, it definitely was flaring up, but it wasn't really as clearly defined that there was a center that was getting quite well wrapped around by convection and was getting a depression in the satellite imagery. I don't think there was that very clear defined depression. I think we were starting to see a more symmetrical storm, but I don't feel like we were starting to see the development of an eye.
David, your thoughts?
He's not.
He's not here.
I am
Oh,
here.
he's-
I'm
there
just
he is. He
on
does surprise
mute.
you.
He was muted.
Well, looking at it, it's definitely getting bigger. I've been listening closely to what Thomas and Tim have said, and as we wait for the next advisory to come out from the National Hurricane Centre. I think the amount of people without electricity is now over the 50,000 mark.
At this point,
And
we
there's
have
still a lot
to
of uncertainty, Nathan.
Yes, there is indeed. At this point, we have to consider what we're doing with our coverage at this point because things are happening at a fairly glacial pace right now. And Thomas is about to leave us, and no one else really. Well, it's just me, Tim, and David holding the fort. But I think we should break away at the end of this hour and do a few regular updates and maybe come back in a few hours.
Yeah, I can run the automated service if you think that'd be.
Which
So
one?
I think finish.
The old one.
The only one
The one
I
that
have.
has the out-of-date information by now. Alright.
Sure.
I'll get to
do you
work
have
on
a
it straight away.
Okay.
And
And then do you want me to run it or do you want to run
You can run it, sure.
it? Okay.
Sure.
And yes,
As you
for the
sleep.
viewers that are, and Nathan, for the viewers that are getting a laugh, yes, I do apologize to the viewers. I do have a couple cats that found their way into my studio, and yes, they did happen to be
Oh,
meowing a
sounds
little
like
bit. So
one of
yes,
them knocked something over too.
they actually just fell off the table. So I do apologize to the viewers for that.
Great.
For them hearing my cats in the background.
So,
Blooping material.
because things are developing so slowly out there, guys, we're coming up to what time now? We're coming up to 5 a.m. Central Daylight Time. We're going to take an extended intermission on Force 13 Live. We'll be back at about... I'm not sure just yet, but we'll be doing a normal update on the storm on the Force 13 channel. If you're new to us, please press the subscribe button. There's a lot more to come away from our live events. And we can keep you up to date through many other different mediums too. So I'll produce another update when the next National Hurricane Advisory comes out, and then we will probably go live. I really don't know just when we're going to be doing that yet, but when we do find out, we will post a little poster on all of our social mediums like we have been doing, saying when and where and what, just to keep everyone in the loop as to what's going on. But as is the case right now, those hurricane warnings in effect, probably correctly, because it would appear that we might have a developing hurricane on our hands. So we're going to go away now on Force 13 Live. We're going to keep up the automated stuff, I think, and then we'll be back later. So it's been a pleasure to be streaming for the last 4 hours here on Force 13 Live, and we hope that we've been very useful to you during this overnight period. It's been a pretty crazy time, and then we do it all again later because Barry is keeping everyone waiting as we continue to watch what it's going to do next. This slow motion is not good news for those along the coast. Rainfall totals will probably be higher, and wind speeds will of course be higher too. That's it from now. For now, we'll see you again soon on 413 Live. Stay tuned and thanks for watching.
All right, Jimmy.